All right, good morning. I hope everybody is doing well on this Sunday morning. Just going to do the refresher again just to make sure everything's coming through. With Lovejoy, and today we're going to be doing a sunset background watercolor. So we're going to kind of recreate this image. And actually, let me do one more refresher. It doesn't look like it's pulling up, so I'm not sure if you guys are seeing it at home. All right, looks like it's taking a minute. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so like I said, today we're going to be doing watercolor today, and I'm basically going to give you a crash course intro to watercolor. And like I said, we're going to kind of recreate this image. So we're going to do kind of a nice abstract background here, and I'm going to show you two different ways that you can apply your watercolors. And then while the background's drying a little bit, we're going to practice our palm trees, and then we'll come back to our palm trees and add that to our painting. All right. So a few things about your supplies. I am using specific watercolor paper, and you can see here that I do have it taped to the board. So I used painter's tape and painted the edges. Because this is a water-based medium, if you use it with just basically the watercolor flat like this, it's going to start to warp a little bit as it absorbs the water. So what you can do is you can tape the edges, like I said, with painter's tape, do your whole thing, and then after it fully dries, then you'll peel the tape away. And it is kind of nice because that will give you a nice kind of crisp white border around your painting. If you don't like that, you don't want the border, there are a few other things that you can do to kind of make your paper not warp so much. And if you're interested in those, just send me an email and I will explain it to you. So, on other supplies, I am using actual watercolors today, but I will do a few little demos or a few steps with acrylic paint and adding a lot of water to it because you can actually do both. And that's what kind of makes acrylic paint so versatile. So like I said, I will be using the student grade or the basically student, rather cheaper watercolors. You can pick these up at Walmart, Michael's, $2 or $3, sometimes $5. And then I'll show a little bit with the acrylic paint. So for starting in watercolors, you've got two different ways that you can apply kind of your nice abstract background. We're going to have a wet method, and that's where I'm going to fill this whole space in with water. Let it start to soak a little bit on the paper, and then you add your pigment. Then we have the dry method to where we don't add any of that water, and we're basically just applying the watercolor pigment directly on the paper, and it's not going to have as much blending or bleeding. And you can kind of choose which one that you like as we do our full background on this section. All right, and if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to leave a comment or a question in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer that while we are going along the process. All right. Oh, and hi, Anita. Welcome. All right, so first one I'm going to show is the wet on wet method. Just because, again, that's going to take a lot of water, and I want it to dry a little bit. So I do like using the bigger brushes for that, just because I can glop on a good amount of water on there. And super exciting, you're just watching me put water on the paper. We're kind of filling that whole space up. And it is okay if you overlap where that tape is, especially if you want your color or your design to go all the way to that edge. So again, just kind of loading that color in there. And you'll see that maybe your paper starts to buckle a little bit. That just means it's absorbing the water, and that's why we have the paint down first. So let's see, let's do it with some blue. I'll actually use sunset colors on the main one. So when you're ready, you actually just kind of grab your paint, and there will be a little bit of water in there. And then where you want it on here, you literally just drop your pigment in there, and then the water is going to make it bleed. So it does make it a lot of fun. And you can introduce other colors. So let's see, let's grab a little bit of red. Maybe it can make some purple. And then same thing. You don't have a whole lot of control, and that's some of the fun of it. And you just get to play with how it blends. Now, I do actually have my board take the same position for filming, but you can pick this up. Let me see. So you could pick this up and then start moving your paper, and that will let some water run in different places. So I totally want you to embrace your inner 5-year-old as you're doing this and just experiment and go, oh my gosh, what's this do? What's this do? If you even want to go back in, let's see, let's add some actual purple. And you can tell with watercolor paint, you actually don't need a whole lot of pigment. So that's why it's actually a really nice medium to work with. And it's a nice travel medium. So a lot of people a lot of artists that travel will carry watercolors with them when they travel because they can still do quick little studies, quick little paintings. So I will use the same colors for the dry method just so you could have a comparison. I'm going to clean my brush out and I'm going to dry it off a little bit because, like I said, this is a bit of the drier method and it's not going to blend nearly as much or run as much on the drier part. So still using that same brush, and like I said, I'm going to stick with the same colors. I do have a little bit of water on my brush so that way I can pick it up off the pad. And then let's see, we kind of started in the same spot. Then you put it on there and it doesn't run as much. So you have a bit more control with the dry method compared to the wet method. And even once you do the dry method, you can go back and grab some more water and then kind of play with it and move it around. So like I said, you do have a bit more control with this method compared to the wet on wet. But I do like the wet on wet just because it gives, there's a little bit of randomness that happens while you paint. And here, let's see, we'll do a little bit adding that red to it as well. You will get a little bit of blending where there's water already, but where it's the dry canvas, not so much. And again, you can clean that brush, go back, and you can do a little bit of actual blending and a bit more control. Let me throw a little bit of purple on here in a minute. All right, let's see, we kind of threw a little purple spot in there. And again, just different techniques. If there is something on there that maybe it gets too much, you could take a paper towel and kind of pull that pigment back. You can take away what's on there and what we call a relief. All right, so a few different methods to try. All right. So moving over into this main section, kind of like the image that we were sampling, we're going to start with yellow at the bottom, and I'm going to do the wet on wet blending method because that's what this one was for. So I'll start on the bottom, we'll have some yellow coming up here, then we'll get into oranges, and then we'll get into some reds and purples. And I did do a quick sample just in case this doesn't dry by the time we do our design, our palm tree on there. So I may end up doing the palm tree on this one. And then if I have enough time, I'll do another palm tree on this one because I want this to be dry before I start to add the black paint on there. All right. Awesome. And hi, Deb from Atlanta. Thanks for joining us. I went to school in Savannah, Georgia. I went to the art college there and I loved it. Method. So I'm going to start putting that base of the water on here. And as you play with acrylic or with watercolor paint, you can even play with the amount of water that you add on your canvas or on your paper. You actually probably would not be doing this on canvas. And like I said, I want you to just go back. You're 5 years old. You can even break out your grade school watercolors if you still have them or if your kids have. And any of my videos on the YouTube channel, you could actually follow along and do them with watercolor paint. You don't have to have acrylic paint to follow along for any of my tutorials. And with that being said, you could do them with colored pencils, crayons, markers, anything. I highly recommend just using what you have at home to get creative. All right, so I'm actually going to go ahead, we'll put this right here. This is my acrylic paint. I'll use a little bit of the watercolor in a moment, but I just want to show you guys at home that if you do have acrylic paint, you can treat this like watercolors. So what I like to do is, these little containers are nice because they hold the water. Actually, I need the yellow, so let me put it over here. So I kind of put a little bit of water in there, and then using just a touch of pigment, you start kind of mixing that in with the water. And then you can go right to your paper and then treat it just like watercolors. And with, at least with the acrylic paint, you could actually grab more pigment and put it directly on there and then kind of move it around, and you'll get a bit more saturation possibly than some of your actual watercolors. So like I said, you can use acrylic paint, water it down and treat it like watercolors, or you can use your actual watercolors. So since I have actual watercolors, I am going to use that. And again, just showing you that using even the cheaper watercolors, the student grade watercolors, you still can get nice effects. All right. So just kind of fill in that space in, and it doesn't have to be anything amazing. Just slap your brush back and forth. I don't want you thinking too much. If you do want a place where maybe it's a bit more intense yellow, maybe less water on your brush and grab more of that pigment, and you can kind of try to place it in that area. You do have to give up a certain amount of control when you work with watercolors, just because that's the nature of watercolors. So it's really good to kind of let that go and then incorporate the Bob Ross aspect of happy accidents. So now I've grabbed a little bit of orange on my brush, and I'm going to be placing this right into the yellow, and we're going to see it bleed like we did up here. And just kind of placing it in there, watching it bleed. Again, you can pick up your paper or your panel and start to rotate it if you want more of this to kind of bleed down here, if you want it to bleed up in the other direction. Again, just play, full permission to play with watercolors. And then if you start looking at this and realize, you know what, that's still too collected compared to what I want, you can go back over with the brush and start moving the pigment. And again, keeping a bit of a light pressure and grabbing more of that orange. I'm going to put in there a little more intense. I didn't have much water in my brush for that, so the pigment came out a lot more saturated. And this is a great medium to work with that just kind of makes you slow down a little bit. I do realize, given circumstances of life right now, we are being forced to slow down when we don't want to, but sometimes that is a good thing. And in the creative world, that really is what it does for you, is it just helps slow you down. So I'm adding a little bit more water to the top, and I'm going to move into some red. There we go. Nice. And because my paper is already starting to buckle and warp a little bit, that red's being pulled towards the top. And a lot of times with watercolors, like I said, some things may happen that you weren't planning on, and you have to learn to embrace it. A lot of times, the things that you weren't planning on, you'll find that you like it a lot, and then you try to recreate those in the future. So again, just play and have fun. All right, so let's see. We've got a few questions. Anita is asking, looks like I'm using solid watercolor paint. I have separate watercolor paint tubes and acrylic paint tubes. What's the difference? Same brand and colors. Okay, good question. So watercolor paint, to begin with, these are what we call cakes, and it's just basically solid pigment, and then you add the water to it. It's going to be the same thing with the tubes of watercolor, and actually I thought I had a few around here, but I don't. With the tubes of watercolor, it's going to be not quite watered down pigment, but same thing as acrylics. It's just going to be a concentration of pigment that you can add water to and adjust. In general, watercolor pigment is a bit more transparent, not as saturated. Kind of an in-between watercolor and acrylics is something new that I would say probably in the last 3 or 4 years has been really popular. Inks. And inks are a good in-between watercolors and acrylics, but it's also still very, very diluted. But the inks have a more intense pigment saturation compared to watercolors. And then acrylics have even more of an intense pigment saturation compared to the inks or the watercolors. And then if you take it a step further, oils, because it is an oil base, the saturation in the pigment is going to be even more intense, and I actually find it more beautiful than acrylic paint. So it's just kind of different levels. You also have, after watercolors, you have gouache, and then inks, and then acrylics, and then oils. And I'm sure there's somewhere in between oils and acrylics. I personally, because I'm so used to acrylics and I'm so used to layering, I treat my watercolors the same way I treat my acrylics. And I'll actually do quite a bit of layering in my work. So each artist is going to have a different style, a different approach. So don't worry about using a very specific brand or getting the exact right materials. Just kind of find your way with the materials that you have and what works for you. So I hope that it was kind of long-winded, but I hope that clarified your question a little bit. If not, feel free to ask another one. All right, so in here, I actually want a little bit of purple on the top. So I'm going to grab a little bit more water since it kind of dried out, and I'm grabbing the purple. And you will notice as you're working with your watercolors, your darker pigments, your red, sometimes your green, your blue, purple, browns, and blacks, a little bit of pigment will go a long way. So start off sparing. Your lighter colors, your yellow, sometimes your green, sometimes your very specific lighter colors, you will need more pigment. So again, play with what kind of works for you, and remember that one brand may act a little differently than another brand. All right, so doing the same thing, and I'm just kind of adding these. I'm going to go back with some water and blend them in a little bit. So because we let that paper dry just a little bit while I was talking, it affected the way it was absorbed. So I'm going back with just a touch of water on my brush and just going to light pressure, blending these in a little bit. They will mix a little bit with the red and kind of create a new color. But yeah, just have fun. And again, remember, if you're holding your breath, just breathe. This is only watercolor. Watercolor supplies generally are a little bit more affordable than acrylic supplies, just because you can buy a pad of paper and it usually is 20 or 30 sheets in the paper compared to just buying a single canvas and that's all you have. And then you can pick up affordable watercolors or use your acrylics. All right. All right, so let's see. We've got another question, and thanks, Anita. I'm glad that answer worked for you. Deb is asking that she paints on canvas with acrylics, and someone told her to do a coat of white paint on the canvas first. I'm gonna have to keep more supplies around me. I don't have a canvas right here. So on your canvas, if it's already white, that means it's gessoed. And that's really all that white paint is, and it gives you a solid base to layer your new acrylics on. If you get a canvas that is considered a raw canvas, it's going to be kind of a burlap color or just kind of a canvasy color, and you can see the thread of the canvas. If you apply paint directly to that without having that gesso ground on there, it's going to absorb the paint really quickly and you're going to lose a lot of what you did, so you'll have to reapply it. When that gesso is on there, it gives you a base, so that way you can just directly apply your acrylics or watercolors or oils directly on top of that. Most days, I would say 99% of all the canvases pre-stretched out there already have the gesso on it. So if it's white, it already has the gesso. If you're not sure, flip the canvas upside down and look at the back. And the back generally is not going to be white, it's going to be that canvasy color, and that was the original canvas before it got gessoed. So that's a kind of a good way you can tell if your canvas is gessoed or not. But go right ahead and just paint right on top of that surface. All right, so I like, even while I was talking, some of that bleeding happened with the purple and the red. So like I said, just kind of play with it. The paper is still kind of wet, but I think it should be okay to do our design on top of it. So we're going to practice our design on these two just for practice, and that gives this time to dry. And if we have time, I'll do this one. If not, we'll just leave it. All right, so as we do our silhouette design, I do like using a bit of the longer, skinnier brushes, and this is excellent, excellent practice for brush control. So just keep in mind that this will get easier the more that you do it. For an alternative to the brush, one of my favorite tools is this. It's a brush pen, and it has India ink in there, which is a very dark, even light fast ink that a lot of people will use forever. You can buy the India ink in the bottle, and then you dip your brush in the bottle and then, you know, go to do your design. But having it in the brush pen, this back part is all filled up with it, and you do have a nice pointy tip. And again, you get just really good practice, and it's nice because then you're not constantly reloading to grab more pigment for your brush. And as you're working with any of the brushes, play with the pressure of your brush. Keeping a light pressure is going to create a skinnier line. More pressure is going to be a fatter line. And this one's almost out of ink. So again, just play with that. And as you are beginning the phases of painting and getting comfortable with the brush, be kind to yourself if you have some super skinny lines or if you have some fat lines, if you have both. Your muscles are learning a lot as you hold the brush and as you do this. So you can treat the brush pen the exact same way that you treat the regular brush. And again, just for a bit of comparison, I'm adding some water to my brush, grabbing the black paint, a little bit more water, and same thing, keeping that light pressure compared to more pressure that creates a fatter line. And as you're working with the brush, sometimes you can put your pinky out, put that ground on somewhere, and use that as your pivot point, or rest your forearm against the table to kind of help keep you steady. And you definitely want to breathe while you're doing this. It is not going to help to hold your breath, because then you're going to be kind of shaky if you're holding your breath. All right, so again, I want you to practice your palm trees before we move over here. So I'm going to do a quick little palm tree here with the brush, and then I'll move up and do a few here with the brush pen, and then we'll jump over here. So kind of just making our way around. All right, so for the palm tree, I keep it rather simple. We're going to start with the trunk of the palm tree, and I usually put my brush where I want the palm tree to end, and then just kind of pull it down off the bottom. And because it is the trunk of the palm tree, I go for a little more pressure, a little bit wider and fatter brush stroke. All right, then we're going to do the first two palm fronds. And again, I start at the base, start here, light pressure, pull it around. And these first two palm fronds, I want them to kind of arc back towards the tree trunk, almost as if they're getting ready to hug that tree trunk. Then we add our few other palm fronds here, here. And as you can see, I do go back and grab more paint each time, just because I want this to be a nice solid pigment. If it does get to where you can see the texture, you just have to go back over it. So once you have your palm tree, your tree trunk, your palm fronds, now we're going to do the leaves on the palm fronds. And again, breathe. And these are basically little dash marks shooting off both sides of the palm frond. I do want you overlapping these. I want you to have a healthy, fluffy palm tree. And as you're doing this, it looks really weird when you only have one palm frond done with all the leaves, so don't judge it. And do all your palm fronds before you judge your palm tree, and be kind to your palm tree when you're judging it. I live in Southern California. I see tons and tons of palm trees out here. They come in many, many shapes, sizes, directions. They grow towards the sun, obviously, but they come in so many different personalities. So embrace the personality of your palm tree. Remember to breathe, exhale as you touch the brush to the canvas. And on your design, you can have as many palm trees as you want. All right, there's my very sloppy palm tree. And then we will put a ground on there as well. All right. Excellent, excellent. Glad those answers to the questions helped. Um, Excellent, Jean. I'm glad you enjoyed the palm trees. I've taught how to paint palm trees for so many years. I'm glad I'm able to break them down easily for people. All right, so let's go ahead and actually move over to here. This is dry enough, so my black's not going to bleed on there. And maybe I'll have enough time to do 2 palm trees. Let's see. So I'm going to first put a base ground on here, and I am going to go back up to that big brush just because it's going to be a little easier. Black paint, and I am holding the brush using that full width of it. There we go, and just pulling it straight across. Grab a little bit more of that pigment. All right, and when you're working with watercolors, you are going to notice that your water that you're cleaning your brushes in gets dirty very, very quickly. So if your water gets this dirty and you end up going back to a lighter color, you want to go get fresh water. Because any of this black pigment that's in the water, and if I went to go grab the yellow again, it's going to mix with it and it's going to diffuse and dirty the color of the yellow. So a lot of professional watercolor artists will have a glass of water for their light colors and then a glass of water for their dark colors. I do know some watercolor artists that actually have 6 and 7 glasses of water and they use 1 water glass for each color. So that way, again, when they're dipping in to a communal cup of water, they're not going to contaminate their other colors. Nice, nice. Awesome. Thanks, Kat, for jumping on. And we got another question. Do I enjoy watercolors? Yes, I very much enjoy watercolors. I actually started doing watercolors about 2 years ago, year and a half, 2 years ago, as a challenge. Because in my traditional painting, I fill up every space. I don't leave the white of the canvas. I do layers. I do very un-watercolor concepts. So to challenge myself, I took up watercolor and forced myself to leave the white of the paper. Oh, I'm going to actually grab the other one since this is out of ink. So we're going to go back to the brush for this. And in a moment, I will show you a few of my current watercolors that I did a couple days ago. And in the description box below, there is a link to the watercolors that I have for sale. So feel free to jump down, check those out. They all are in the animal theme. And they're all originals. I sell them for 35 bucks, $4 flat rate shipping, and you get an original watercolor. And they are all signed by me. So I highly recommend that you challenge yourself. If you find something that goes, oh, that's kind of scary, part of you wants to do it. And the more that you can embrace the things that you find creatively scary and accomplish them or tackle them and try and realize that they're not that bad, it gives you more confidence to try other things. So other things in life that you may be scared of, there probably is good reason for it. But in the creative world, if you're scared of it, that means you actually need to give it a try. All right. Oh, good. And we've got 2 jars of, honey jar and marmalade jar. Nice. Way to reuse your glass containers. That's awesome. I do that tons. All right, so I've got the base of my tree trunk, my palm tree on here. Now we're going to move into those palm fronds, and I'm going to start at the base, curve these kind of towards them. And I did move back to that skinny brush just because the brush pen is actually almost out of ink. All right, light pressure. Again, if you're finding that you're shaky as you go to touch the canvas, exhale as you touch the canvas with the brush. Hum a little song or talk to yourself because I find that as I talk to you guys, I'm less likely to hold my breath. All right, so we've got our palm fronds on there. Now we're going to be moving in with tiny little dash marks and again, light pressure, making these little palm fronds. And it is nice with watercolors just because it keeps so fluid with the water and the ink and the pressure of your brush. You can get this with acrylics, but you do actually have to add a lot more water. And then depending on your brand of acrylics, I have found with some brands, and I'm trying to remember which brand that was, when I tried to water down their acrylic paint, it just became really cakey and the pigment started to separate, and it was very frustrating. So test out your tools, and make adjustments for what you need with your tools on that day. You know, because if you paint outside, it's going to dry a lot quicker compared to painting inside, and that's going to change the pace of what you're painting. And that's really what creativity is about, is adjusting to your current circumstances to create something. A lot like yoga, to where maybe one day you were able to do a yoga pose, the next day maybe it's a little more difficult. That's just where you're at for today. And as you're doing this, I am keeping this in the same position for the filming purposes, but if you need to flip your canvas sideways, upside down to be able to make these marks in a more comfortable manner, feel free to do that. Most things in art are merely suggestions. But if you're taking an art history exam, don't tell the professor I said that. And again, do all your palm fronds before you judge your tree, and be kind in your judgment. If you name your tree, it gives them a bit more personality. Let's throw little coconuts on here. Not bad. And if you want to add another palm tree, you can. If you want to put birds in the sky, let's actually put a few birds in the sky. These are going to be some pelicans flying along the coastline. Very Southern California. Clouds are very challenging. So I do recommend continue trying. And clouds with watercolor, I'm not quite sure I can do a demo on that yet, because I'm used to acrylic paint and layering. So maybe I'll do an acrylic paint demo for clouds. But I would recommend just searching YouTube. There's tons of amazing people teaching out there, and some that are specifically been doing watercolor for years. So as much as I want you to stay with my teaching only, do try a bunch of different teachers and take the parts that work from you, because I'm learning from other teachers as well. Nice. All right, and thanks for the suggestion, Anita. I will add more plants, monstera, sorry. Yeah, I think that's what it says, perfect. But I'll add those, and I am looking into possibly doing more watercolor tutorials. Because it's still relatively new to me, I haven't felt the confidence level to teach it as much. But I think with all of these YouTube videos, you guys are giving me confidence to move forward with that. So I will be doing more. Oh, and a quick demo, or a quick little demonstration, or show and tell really. These are a few of the watercolors I have done in the last 2 days. All right, so we've got a nice little flamingo, and I do have a flamingo demo coming up for next week, I believe. I've got a nice little fox, and these are where I layer quite a bit. I do use that pen to do the outline, and I filmed both of these. I don't know if I can teach it as a tutorial, but I filmed both of them, and I'll talk about my process over that. And as soon as I get those finished and edited, then I'll get that on my YouTube channel. So just showing a few other ones. I haven't gotten any of these on the website yet. So if you're interested in one of them, just shoot me an email, paintwithlovejoy@gmail.com, and we can figure out payment and get the collection going. So I think that takes care of, yeah, we went a little over 30 minutes today, so not bad. So just wanted to bring it back to that final image in case you guys needed to see this. And yeah, so feel free, check out the other videos on my page, come back and hang out for tomorrow's daily demo, and just keep getting creative. Check out my online school, paintwithlovejoy.com. I've got all my YouTube stuff on there, and then some more monthly in-depth classes like my Paint Your Pet and Intro to Palette Knife. So I hope you guys have an excellent Sunday and a wonderful afternoon. I will see you tomorrow. Cheers.